Well, hello there, friends, church people from home wearing all sorts of different types of clothing setups. It's sunny out, well, at least it was yesterday, so we could be in shorts. Listen, there's Adam and Alessandra's second song, Thank You. Let me start with that, thank you. We've been held up in this new environment for some time. We've been talking about this black box, this place where our members will make a contribution. It's that one-off, that one time. I brought a check, here you go, it goes in this black box. It represents about $600 a week. And because we're working remotely like this, the black box opportunity is gone for you and it's gone for us. And we've been talking about it every single Sunday, and you've responded. And we are incredibly grateful, so thank you. Thank you to all of you who have stepped up and used pre-authorized giving. From a business perspective, it helps budget more than anything. Recurring revenue helps the wheels go round and keeps this whole operation functional. And because we're self-funded, we rely on you and your thoughtfulness, your kindness. So thank you so much. I want to leave you with this. You get what you're looking for. We get what we're looking for. And you can go out into the community, and if you're looking for what you're looking for, you're going to see it no matter what. Yesterday, I walked into Home Depot. We went to rent some tools, and me and the guy, we drive the same vehicle. Mine's diesel, his is gas. We chatted about it, and in the process, I mentioned I'm going to rent a pressure washer. He says, don't rent it. I got one. Where do you live? I tell him. He lives like 3 minutes away from my house. He brought it over. I used it. I called him back. He came and picked it up. You get what you're looking for. The world is riddled with kindness and love. Yes, you can see other things, but there is so many good things out there. And because of your kindness, because of your love, Friends Church continues to thrive through all of this so that we're able to be there for others. And thank you very much for that.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to Friends Church. Thanks, Vince. I appreciate that. Yeah, there is a lot of beautiful things happening right now. People taking care of each other, people supporting each other. Even I've been hearing people saying it hasn't been as bad as I was expecting. And on the other hand, I've heard a lot of people saying, yeah, it just hit. Or we're waiting for it to hit. It's almost like waiting for it to hit feels more painful than when it does. I don't know. And so while we have this one side, this thankfulness of the life we have and the care we can have of each other, there is another side where things are hard right now for people. I've been studying a lot of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Bishop Desmond Tutu's work, and I didn't realize a lot of their story. You maybe don't know that the Dalai Lama is actually from Tibet, but when he was a young man, he was kicked out of his own country by an occupying force. And he's been living in exile for the last 50 plus years. As the spiritual leader of a country, of a people, of a religion even, I could say, he can't even be around the people he loves. His life is around hardship. He can't go where he wants. He can't do what he wants. His mission in life has had to be completely changed because he can't be in his country, can't be with his people. And yet that guy has an insane amount of joy in his life. The Archbishop Desmond Tutu, South Africa, fought apartheid, led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to help bring South Africa back together after all the pain and suffering. He's in his 80s now, and his prostate cancer's come back. Normal course of treatment isn't working. They're giving him experimental drugs, a cocktail, and it doesn't seem to be helping at all. And yet you watch these two spiritual thought leaders come together, and they are just laughing their butts off. They're teasing each other, they're hugging each other, they're high-fiving each other, they're playing jokes with each other. How do two men who have that much adversity have that much joy? Or maybe the question I want to ask is this: how do we, in the midst of all that we're going through right now, find that much joy? I don't know about you, but if there's a pathway, if these men have figured something out, I want to know about it. Because I want a life of joy. So I want to invite you for the next 4 weeks. Come out as we study their thoughts, their thinking, I'm going to air quote strategy because it's not a strategy, it's deeper than that. Their pathway to joy. Because I want to be able to have their attitude through anything. See you guys starting next week. Jeff, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Vince. Looking forward to that series. It is going to be good. If you know what's good for you, you'll join us. I'm Jeff. I'm happy to be here this morning. I got out golfing yesterday, so I just got a real permagrin on my face right now. I'm feeling great. That is one of the paths to joy, I think. I'm not sure if they say that in the book yet. So a number of years ago, Kathy and I were at a funeral of a friend of ours that we had gotten to know at in a former church experience. And we went into the funeral. We saw a lot of old friends and people that we had known, it seems from another lifetime almost. The pastor got up and began to speak, and it didn't take long before I found myself very aggravated. It was little things that he was saying were just grating me. I would hear him make these strong statements loaded with these beliefs that I was familiar with. I was very familiar with some of the stuff that he was saying. It had been a while since I heard someone talking like that, and I couldn't almost concentrate. I found myself leaning over to Kathy saying, "Can you believe people still believe some of this? Can you believe he's still saying that stuff?" I started looking around the room thinking, I can't be the only one in this room that is struggling with some of the stuff he's saying. I was so distracted, I didn't hear a word he was saying. I was just looking around, and then I was on my phone. Kathy was like, "Jeff, pay attention." I was just like, I can't listen to this. It was in a season, it was a real stage 3 season for me that I was in. I was renovating, purging, reevaluating beliefs that I had grown up with, and there were some that I had just decided, you know what, I have no more use for that there. That's got to go away. It was right in the middle of the season when this funeral was happening, and oh man, I'm telling you, I didn't realize it at the time, but it seems I developed a little bit of an allergy to people who believed the way I once did about certain things. I was hypersensitive. That funeral just made it that much more obvious to me. I was so bothered. I would walk into a room with people who I knew still held those beliefs, and I almost didn't want to talk to them. But the energy that I had, the interest level in talking to people who were holding these beliefs, it was drying up. I would rather just avoid them. We'd get invited to a party where I knew a bunch of these kind of people were, and I'd be like, yeah, I don't really want to go. I would just rather avoid them. Every now and then, I would get stuck at a funeral, at a wedding, particular function, and people would start talking, and it was almost too much for me to even just sit and listen. I almost felt like I should say something and disagree, because otherwise they're going to think I'm good with some of the stuff they're saying. Oh, it was tough. Tough watching. Tough being in this place where I just so aggravated. Let me ask you, have you ever developed an allergy to people who believe certain things? It might not even be their spiritual beliefs, like it was for me. It might be someone who has a certain political view. Maybe it's around a social issue. maybe gay rights or legalization of marijuana. Someone's tripping off one way or another, good or bad. Proper response, the government to the pandemic. Maybe it's something on social media that they are just going off on, and you sit there and it's like, oh, if I see another post by that person on this topic, I am going to let them have it. It's like this allergy, this reaction that's just like, oh, things they say that just get under your skin. I think this can happen anytime you realize someone doesn't do or like or act the same way we do. You spot a difference, and then there's this tendency to kind of close off to that person, isn't there? To distance, to marginalize. I can easily, in those moments, find the justification to put that person and what they're saying or what they're doing, whatever, I can find the justification, then go and put them into a bit of a different category, a lower category. I can justify treating that person a little differently than those who I really seem to identify well with. Chances are good you've either had this happen to you or you've done this to someone. We do this so instinctually. This common tendency to see people and beliefs in kind of these right or wrong categories. It's something to refer to as dualistic thinking. It's very common in our early development because it simplifies our world. From an early age, we're taught to label and categorize things. We can look at a person and say, oh, that person is tall, or that person is short. Like we identify things based on comparison, differentiation. That person's skin is dark, it's not light. Oh, they have an accent. Oh, that one doesn't. That one sounds normal. Oh, that person is friendly. Oh, no, that person is very unfriendly. We continually categorize people based on kind of it's either this or it's that. Dualistic thinking requires comparison. It requires kind of pitting something against another thing. It uses descriptive words on either end. And very subtly, it can be kind of like good or bad. Right, wrong, pretty, ugly, stupid, smart. This dualistic thinking, it's not really a bad thing. In fact, it actually helps us take immediate control of our world. It helps us kind of snap people into categories and make sense of everything. It's actually needed in practical life. I mean, if you're a teacher, nurse, scientist, engineer, this is valuable because you know what? There are right and wrong ways to answer certain types of questions. There's right and wrong ways to perform medical procedures. There is actually a way to determine whether something works or it doesn't. It's either or. For many parts of our world, dualistic thinking is actually very necessary. Where it's not that helpful, though, is when we're trying to describe the immense subtleties of our actual personal experience. It doesn't leave a whole lot of room for the thousands of shades of complexity and description that lie between two polar opposites. In many areas of our lives, there isn't just a hot or a cold. There isn't just a true or a false. There isn't just a liberal or a conservative. There isn't just a gay or a straight or a Christian or religious person and an atheist. There are thousands of degrees in between. Which is why the dualistic mind, it really isn't good at processing things like mystery, like Vince talked about last week. It's too complex. The concept of God or the more than, the energy, the life force behind perhaps all that we know and see. And like the binary mind, the dualistic, it's either this or it's that. And no, it breaks down. You talk about grace. You talk about forgiveness. You talk about suffering. You talk about love. Those things you can't wrap into either or. You can't describe in kind of on opposite fields. They're complex. Shoot, you look at a little baby being born. How, with a dualistic mind, can you describe what has just happened here? What that is? The binary mind melts down. And here's the problem. So much of our lives lie in these complex worlds where it's just a million shades of gray, of understanding. Years ago, we developed a teaching series at Friends Church, and it was designed to be able to introduce people to the limitations of this binary dualistic thinking, the dangers of it. We wanted to challenge people's binary judgments of others, of their situations, and their morality. We wanted to kind of explore it and get people wrestling. First week, we talked about our tendency to look at life in terms of right and wrong. I talked about flyers. Maybe some of you were there when I did. You know, flyers are a good thing. These things that come in the mail, many people rely on them heavily to figure out, okay, well, bathroom tissue, it's on sale. I'm going to go and get some. Maybe not lately. Maybe not waiting for the flyer now. But typically, people will look through those flyers, they'll figure out what's on sale, and they'll go and buy, and they'll save themselves lots of money. They're a very good thing for many people. But for me, I found when I would, especially Canadian Tire, for some reason, I'd see that Canadian Tire flyer come in, and I'd be reminded of all these different things that I felt I needed. Now, need is a weird term. Kathy and I disagree often on what we need when it comes to tools and anything in the Canadian Tire thing. But I would look at it, I go, I really need this. And Kathy would be saying, no, we don't need to spend the money on that right now. I'm like, I really feel... And it led to all kinds of arguments. It led to all kinds of unnecessary purchases. Over time, I began to realize, man, those flyers are actually like crack cocaine for me. They lead me to bad places. So I told this story. I just said, these flyers are bad. Well, what are they? Are they bad or are they good? Some other people are going, I love flyers. I just can't wait. They help us so much. And I'm looking and I'm going, no, they're bad. Right or wrong? What's right for them is wrong for me? How does that work? Next week, I interviewed a lesbian Christian couple on stage. Oh, that was a mind bender for some at that time. Enough to cause them to leave the church over that. How do you put a gay couple on stage who love God, devoted to each other, love people? There was pieces of people's brains in that room that was saying, no, gay equals evil or bad or something wrong. But Christian is good. Well, you can't mix those two. Oh man, next week we challenge a whole nother side of the crowd by bringing up a fundamentalist Christian who is anti-gay but turned out to be a really nice person. Well, there was people in that room that were going, no, anyone that falls in that category is a complete a-hole. I want nothing. But this guy was pretty nice. Oh, the dualistic gymnastics people were doing to try to figure out how can that be right. Wait a second. No, that's wrong. Well, just wait. Tripped up a lot of people. Why? Because we tend to label and categorize people into these spots, and it doesn't give room for the complexity. This dualistic way of seeing the world is largely the culprit behind a lot of judgmentalism that we watch in religious communities. Not only do we try to lump things into two clean and neat, tidy, black and white categories, into us versus them categories, but we tend to try to make our category just a little better, don't we? Oh, you're divorced. Oh, okay. Yeah, well, sure. Come on over. You can sit right over there. Oh, you're single. Oh, gee, that guy swears a lot. Oh, that guy, he's a heavy drinker. Huh, interesting. That guy votes for that party. That guy believes that? Or worse, those people don't believe this? With a single, simple stroke of a pen, we can dismiss, we can exclude, we can isolate. You take it further in this dualistic kind of thinking, it leads to things like prejudice, sexism, racism, ageism. What we're watching happening right down in Minneapolis and in different parts of the U.S. is dualistic thinking on steroids, where certain groups of people have been placed into containers. They're evil, and it's running its course. Dualistic thinking doesn't know what to do with those people who don't check off all the right boxes. It tends to just villainize. It's easier to just condemn, isn't it? I find it very easy to discard those who don't check off my boxes, or just move them out of my peripheral. It's way easier to do that than to wrestle with the complexity that their differences bring. For years, I grew up with this dualistic thinking, and I got to tell you, I was amazingly good at it. I was a rule follower. Rules I was given, whether it was at home or the church or whatever, I followed to a T. And when someone wasn't following the rules, man, I felt all kinds of justification to look at them differently. I did this to my oldest sister. She would go out to a party. Well, we weren't allowed to drink. That was against the rules. I'd hear about a party she was going to. I was like the moral police standing at the door when she'd come home, going, what the heck? What are you doing? I'd catch her doing different things. I was sitting there trying to get her to check off the right boxes, to conform, to fall in line. And if not, then I moved into this kind of place where I would accuse and punish and ridicule, act so condescending. So I was always on my high horse. I don't know how I still have a relationship with my sisters. I was bad. What's sad is when this kind of thinking, this either or binary right and wrong, us versus them thinking, takes hold. What it does in our communities, it forces people to either conform, to make sure that their life checks off the same boxes as those people in power or those people that are vocal, or it forces them into hiding, where they either avoid you or they lie. And you never know what they're really all about, because they're fearing either being judged, blamed, or fixed. It's ironic that so much of this kind of thinking that's found in so many Christian circles is almost, it seems, when I read the life of Jesus, when I see the kind of things he was saying and talking about, it almost seems antithetical to the kind of the message, the kind of the larger message. It just seems so opposite what the Christian way seemed to stand for. Jesus was asked what the most important things to do. Like, of all the things that we got to follow, what is it? He just said, look at, love God and love your neighbor. It all hangs on these two commandments. They're the most important. Just get that right. It's Apostle Paul who said, man, if I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy, but I don't love, I'm like nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. No matter what I say, what I believe, and what I do, no matter what it is my life totals up to, if I don't have love, I have nothing. which is probably why Jesus was always messing with people's dualistic thinking. He was always messing with the categories, never letting people get too entrenched in saying, no, this is the right way, and that's the wrong. This is a good person. This is a bad person. No. He was always screwing with them. The heroes in his story were always the villains in other people's stories. Did you notice that? And one time he's saying, okay, so you have this spiritual leader, and you have this, in that day, tax collector would be, maybe we'd say we'd use a pedophile, or we'd use someone who we just think is the lowest form of life on this planet. He would use these two categories, and he'd say, there they are praying. And you got this spiritual leader who's saying, God, I'm just so grateful that I'm not acting like the robbers and these evil people and that guy over there, that pedophile. I'm just so grateful I'm not that. And he says, and then right there in the same room, you've got this pedophile. And he's sitting there and he can't even look up. He's beating his chest and he's going, God, I'm sorry. Jesus tells the story and he says, whose prayer do you think God heard? And you know there were people there going, wait a second. Are you suggesting that? And Jesus going, mm-hmm. His interactions with people who didn't fit the accepted categories were always messing with the dualistic thinking of their day. Tax collectors, prostitutes, lepers. The Samaritan woman at the well is just so unbelievable. That would have been the greatest mind screw of them all. Samaritans were considered so low. Like racism, you better believe it. The Jewish people never had anything to do with Samaritans. And then in a very patriarchal, male-dominated culture, women were down there too. So you take a Samaritan and a woman, but then you say, okay, well, this woman has been divorced numerous times and now is living with another one. I mean, you couldn't have stacked up more reasons why you should have nothing to do with that woman. And it was like Jesus walked up to her, clean slate, having a conversation with her. Blew the minds of his followers sitting there going, oh, what is happening? Jesus was continually showing them that they couldn't trust the dualistic categories they built. You know what's interesting is stage 2 is a world that, because it's trying to make it simple for everyone to jump on board, dualistic thinking is very common. There's a lot of rules set up. This is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, whatever. You would think if you move into stage 3, you start questioning and evaluating everything. You would think the dualistic thinking would go away. But you know what? What my experience is in the throes of my stage 3 kind of questioning, wrestling with everything, all I had done was exchange one kind of dualistic thinking for another. I went from being the church guy who was criticizing anyone who wasn't following the rules to a person who was looking at all the church people saying, you guys are idiots. Anyone that believed the way I used to believe, you guys are idiots. This is good, that's bad. This is right, that's wrong. The us versus them begins to break down in what they call stage 4. I was 15 years old. I went hiking one day on a Saturday with one of our youth leaders. His name was Andrew Stiles. Andrew was a remarkable human being. Everyone wanted to be with Andrew. I loved Andrew. He set up this hiking day. He says, who's coming? And I, without even asking all my buddies, I said, yeah, I'm coming. I'll go. Andrew had a big van. He picked a bunch of us up. When I got into the van, I was like, huh? None of my friends were going. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but there's a bunch of weird kids in that van. These are weird kids in our group that I just didn't relate to. They weren't my type of people. We got out on the road and we're driving, and Andrew just starts asking questions. And I'm sitting there in this van and I'm regretting it. Literally, I'm regretting it within 5 minutes of saying yes and going on this trip, because I'm going, this is gonna be a long day. I can't relate to these people. They're just pure weird. One girl started talking about being vegan. I'm like, what the heck is vegan? And this guy that was sitting beside me, I'd known him for a long time, but I don't know if I had ever spoken maybe more than 3 words. He was dressed in all black. He would be like what they'd call a goth in high school. All black. He had black fingernail polish. I'm looking at him, I'm just like, oh man, okay. But Andrew started asking questions. People started, everyone in the group started talking. I was pretty quiet just listening to all of them. It was interesting, the kinds of things they began talking about. I just had never had the time of day for these people. Over the course of that day, we got out on this hike and we talked and talked about so many different things. Something began to happen for me. I'm out on this trail and this guy starts talking about his family. Now, I was not expecting that. But this guy comes from a rough family. And I remember a number of times on that hike just going, holy, I cannot believe. His mom was in a world of trouble. Drugs, alcohol abuse. This kid got dragged to church by his grandma. He was awkward, socially awkward, but as he's telling some of this stuff, I found something happening in me. I'm seeing this guy in a different way. We get into the van, we're driving home, and Andrew, I don't even know what the question was, but all I remember is this guy starting to open up about his cutting. He always wore long shirts, and often they were way longer than even his arms, and he was just hunched. But he began talking about cutting as a way of getting through his difficulties of his life. I had never heard of cutting before, but he would describe it. He would cut himself. And I was sitting on the seat back there with him. By this point, I was looking at him in a whole different way. But when he started opening up about this, and he pulled back his sleeve, and I was just, it's hard to describe what happens to a person when you have one category of a person, right? You see them in a certain way, and then all of a sudden, you start finding out information about this person. And it's like they start changing right in front of your eyes. That's what was happening to me in that moment. I'm sitting in that van, and the compassion and the empathy was, I just wanted to hug him. I wanted to tell him, buddy, I'll never ignore you again. I got off that van that night, and I just felt like so much had changed. The next youth event, I saw this guy, Tony. And all my buddies are over here. They're going, Jeff, let's go. We're going on and doing this. And I'm looking at Tony, and I'm going, how about we bring Tony along? And they're looking at me like, what are you? Something had changed inside me. It was so undeniable. I didn't know it at the time. In fact, I probably wouldn't have had any words for that experience until over the last number of years, as I've been kind of wrestling with the stage 4 thing. They call this isn't dualism, this is non-duality. Non-duality. This is one of my first experiences with this non-duality. Translated, non-duality is actually it comes from a Sanskrit word, Advaita, which simply means not two, and points to this essential oneness of life, a wholeness that exists here and now when we refuse to use categories to label and judge others with. This way of thinking and seeing points to an intimacy, a love beyond words, right at the heart of the present moment experience that you're having right now. It's when the categories melt and you can see people, see stories, see things in a new way, freeze, just clean slate. And you're just watching, you're just observing something right there without anything filtering, pushing aside, marginalizing. It's a refusal to compare, non-duality, to draw distinction, to villainize, to differentiate. Instead, what it does is it starts looking for commonality. You look at someone and you go, oh, I feel that same way sometimes. Oh, you like that? I love that too. You're able to look past something that would otherwise have pushed them off to the side. Non-dual thinking is our ability to read reality in a way that is not judgmental, in a way that is not exclusionary of the part that we don't understand. When you stop splitting everything up according to what you like and what you don't like, when you stop dividing people by the labels you once used so effortlessly. Oh, he's an American. Oh, well, she's a little less educated. Blue-collar guy, white-collar, African-American, Caucasian, Trump supporter, non-Trump supporter. Oh, yeah, millennial, boomer. The labels start evaporating. And what you see is human. If you can let go of the need to put people into boxes, and you're able to leave these interactions open, what can happen is truly magical. This openness to that which we don't understand. To that which we don't feel comfortable with. This lies at the heart, stage 4. When the focus is no longer differentiation. You're no longer trying to stand up and say, oh no, I don't believe that. That's not me. Oh, they're not like me. I'm this over here. Oh, that's so disgusting. That's not something I'm interested in. No, I don't do that. They're not my type. No, in stage 4, we begin to develop this non-dual way of being in the world that loses the desire to push people away who are different than us. You know, when Friends Church began to make some shifts a number of years back, we began to wrestle more publicly and openly with some of the things that we had once held closely in terms of beliefs. Much of the identity that we developed as a community was built around who we aren't. We didn't see it, perhaps at the time. But much of how we described Friends Church to people around us, how we marketed us, was based on differentiating ourselves from our former selves. We were telling the world, we are not them, we are this. We don't necessarily believe that. You don't have to believe that. You can believe this. It's only been in the last even number of months as we've gone back and we're looking over some of our founding documents, the values we've written, the way that we've written our methodology is so much of it was written from this dualistic mindset, this binary mindset that says, no, we're not this, we're this. No, we're not that, we're this. Constant us versus them language. Over the last while, Vince and I, we've been reviewing some of this stuff. Some of it just feels off now. It's so reactionary, it's so dualistic in its nature. We don't feel the need to continually separate ourselves from certain groups. We don't need to continually pit ourselves against someone else. We've been saying we just want to start talking about the good we want to do in our world. We just want to start talking about making a positive impact. And we don't believe for a second that people who believe differently than us aren't doing that too. We're on the same frickin' team. They don't have to lose in order for us to win. We can all win. We can all be doing amazing things, even though we may be different in certain ways. You know, it's funny in this non-duality, they say the superiority complexes start to evaporate. You stop looking down at people who are different. We lose the will to fight over petty things. We see the futility of proving something is right or wrong with someone who believes something different. Instead, you can just find yourself just hunting for commonality. Richard Rohr says, you go after finding happiness in the likeness. Where you go, oh, actually, we are actually more similar there. I didn't realize that before. What ends up happening is that your world in this process of practicing non-duality, your world actually gets so much bigger rather than getting smaller. Rather than saying, actually, no, this is our group over here, and we're not about, actually, the room at the table you start pulling up chairs. They're saying, hey, come on in. The Tonys start sitting down. The people you just never would have had time for, all of a sudden you have energy. You have room, you have capacity. And rather than continually fixating on the differences, you just spot the likeness. This connection with humanity grows in stage 4, where you look around, you go, man, we are more alike than I ever realized. Your openness to thought and belief of all stripes starts widening. Now, I know there have been people who have been listening to us over the last little while, and you're going, yeah, I didn't really do the stage 2 thing. I wasn't really into church at that point, and you know what? I didn't really deconstruct. I wasn't really I haven't had a whole lot of experience in stage 3. I don't know what I am. Let me tell you something. I met so many different people who have had so little church experience, but you effortlessly live out the stage 4 non-duality. We see it in our community. We see the way that you're so open to people who are so different from you. And we can learn from you. We need to be inspired by your ability to just remain clean slate. You walk in a room and you're not using all the labels that I'm using. You just see human. You just see human. You just see human. Oh, I want that. I want to be one who walks into a room and just sees people. Who can sit in a funeral, regardless of what's said. Rather than point out the thing that bothers me, I can point out the things that I actually really loved. This is what Andrew Stiles did for me years and years ago. I wish I would have recognized it in that moment. But what he created in numerous trips in his van was just pure non-duality. Drop the labels, folks. We're all humans on the same trip. Let me ask you something. Can you spot a dualistic tendency in your life? Do you have an allergy to certain types of people? Could your spiritual journey be calling you to deal with the allergy? To open up your heart, make room for someone drop the category. Could your journey be challenging you to stir up your curiosity and your openness? I hope so. I feel challenged in this. Because a deeper spirituality is a more loving spirituality in my mind. And I think non-duality is my ticket to more love, more connection. That's my prayer. I hope if you're in this boat with me today, you will find some challenge in this. May we this week, above all, may we be found guilty of loving people regardless of the categories they fall in. All right, I'm done. Next week, we begin a new series. Vince mentioned it earlier. Path to Joy. I'm telling you, this is so badly needed. You won't want to miss it. Tune in next week. Have a great week, hey? Drop some categories, and let's be more loving.